Ambassador Min Jun Park stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and tried not to show his nervousness. The chamber was enormous, built to make visitors feel small. 50 different species sat in the curved rows of seats above him, looking down like judges at a trial. Some had multiple eyes. Others didn't have eyes at all. But all of them were watching him. Min Jun had practiced his speech for months. Earth had waited 50 years for this moment. 50 years as an associate member of the Galactic Council. 50 years of following all the rules, helping with every request, proving that humanity deserved a real voice in galactic affairs. Honored council members, Min Jun began, his voice steady. I come before you today to formally request full council membership for Earth and humanity. He activated the holographic display. Images appeared in the air around him, showing everything humanity had accomplished. There were human doctors, working in alien hospitals, saving lives with new treatments. Human engineers fixing broken stations that other species had given up on. Human peacekeepers standing between warring factions, keeping the peace without firing a shot. In 50 years, humanity has contributed to over 2,000 medical breakthroughs, Min Jun said. We have improved station efficiency across 12 sectors. Our peacekeeping forces have the best safety record in Council history. We have proven ourselves worthy of full membership. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then someone laughed. It was High Chancellor Vektar of the Valashi. The Valashi were telepaths, ancient and proud. They considered themselves the most advanced species in the galaxy. Vektar's pale blue skin rippled with amusement. Worthy? Vektar's voice echoed through the chamber. You show us pictures of humans doing simple tasks and call it worthy? More laughter rippled through the council. Min Jun felt his face grow hot, but he kept his expression calm. These are not simple tasks, he said carefully. These are significant contributions to. You are mechanics, interrupted council member Zephron of the Zephrim Collective. The Zephrim were traders, wealthy and influential. You are janitors. You do the work that we don't have time to do ourselves. Primitive work for a primitive species, added Elder Korth of the Korthians. The Korthians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, their civilization spanning thousands of years. You have been in space for barely 200 years. We have been traveling the stars for 10,000. Min Jun took a slow breath. He had expected resistance, but not this level of open contempt. Around the chamber, council members were nodding and making sounds of agreement. Some weren't even looking at him anymore, already bored with the discussion. Your only real talent is violence, Vektar continued, his telepathic presence pushing against Min Jun's mind like a cold wind. You come from a death world, so you know how to fight and survive. That is useful for mercenary work, perhaps, but it is not the foundation for council membership. We are more than our origin, Min Jun said, struggling to keep his voice level. We have shown adaptability, creativity, and dedication. You have shown that you can follow instructions. Zephron cut him off. Like well-trained animals. Should we give council seats to trained animals? The laughter was louder this time. Min Jun saw that even some of the minor species were joining in. The ones that humanity had helped countless times. They laughed because the powerful species were laughing, not wanting to be associated with Earth's embarrassment. Min Jun closed his eyes for just a moment. In that moment, he thought about all the human engineers who had worked through the night, fixing alien technology. He thought about the doctors who had studied 50 different species biologies to save lives. He thought about the programmers who had rewritten failing code. The technicians who had maintained systems that everyone else ignored. The teachers who had patiently explained human innovations to species that barely acknowledged them. All of that work. All of that effort. And this was the response. When he opened his eyes, something had changed in his expression. It was subtle, but Vektar noticed it. The Valashi leaned forward slightly. Curious, Does the Council have any questions about Earth's application? Minjun asked quietly. No questions, Vectar said dismissively. The answer is no. Earth will remain an associate member. Perhaps in another century, if you advance sufficiently, we can revisit this discussion. I understand, Minjun said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a data tablet. Then, I am authorized to deliver Earth's response to this decision. He activated the tablet and began reading. His voice was calm, almost mechanical. Effective immediately. Earth withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and cooperative ventures with the Galactic Council and its member species. All human personnel will return to Earth within 72 hours. All technical support contracts are terminated. All medical exchanges are concluded. All peacekeeping forces are recalled. All diplomatic missions are closed. The laughter in the chamber died. Council members looked at each other, confused. What is this? Vectar demanded. A tantrum? It is a withdrawal, Minjun said simply. You have made it clear that humanity's contributions are worthless. Therefore, we are taking them back. You cannot simply leave, Zephyron said, though he sounded more puzzled than angry. There are procedures, negotiations. Associate members have the right to withdraw at any time, Minjun replied. It's in the Founding Charter, Section 47, Paragraph 12. He had checked. Very carefully. Elder Korth made a dismissive gesture. Let them go. One minor species, leaving changes nothing. We managed perfectly well before humans arrived, and we will manage perfectly well after they leave. Vectar nodded slowly, his telepathic senses trying to read Minjun's emotions. But Minjun had been trained to resist telepathic intrusion. All human diplomats were. It was necessary when dealing with species like the Valashi. Very well, Vectar said. Leave then. When you realize your mistake, you may petition to rejoin as associate members. Though I warn you, it may take decades to process such a petition. More laughter. But it sounded uncertain this time. Minjun bowed formally, showing respect he no longer felt. Thank you for your time, High Chancellor. The galaxy will remember this day. He turned and walked out of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Behind him, council members were already turning to other business, dismissing Earth as irrelevant. Minjun walked through the station corridors toward the docking bay where his ship waited. Other humans passed him, all heading in the same direction. Engineers carrying their toolkits, doctors with their medical bags, technicians with data storage drives. Every human on Concordia Prime was leaving, just as every human across the galaxy was preparing to leave. A Valashi bureaucrat stopped him in the corridor. Ambassador Park, surely this is just a negotiating tactic? You cannot be serious about full withdrawal? Minjun looked at him with tired eyes. But there will be consequences. Yes, Minjun said quietly. There will. He continued to his ship. Once aboard, he sat in the captain's chair and activated his secure communication system. The message was already prepared. He just needed to send it. The message contained 3 words: Protocol Midnight. Execute. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds and thousands of stations, humans received the message. They began packing. They began documenting. And most importantly, they began removing every modification, every improvement, every quiet fix they had made over 50 years. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had really been doing all this time, and it was going to hurt. The first emergency call came 72 hours after Ambassador Park left Concordia Prime. Station Master Kelvos of the Zephyrim Collective stared at his control panel in disbelief. Kestera Station, the newest and most advanced trading hub in the Zephyrim network, was experiencing critical failures. Life support was fluctuating. Power distribution was unstable. Environmental controls were shutting down in random sections. This is impossible, Kelvos said. This station was just renovated 6 months ago. Everything was tested and certified. His chief engineer, a Zephyrim named Tark, looked nervous. "Station Master, I've found something strange. Throughout the station's systems, there are modifications we didn't know about. The signature says they're human-designed patches. Patches for what?" Kelva's demand. Tark pulled up the technical readouts. "For everything. The humans who worked on the renovation didn't just follow our designs. They added their own code, their own systems, their own fixes. Without these modifications, our original designs have critical flaws." Kelvos felt cold despite the rising temperature in the control room. "How critical?" "Life support will fail completely within 3 days," Tark said quietly. "We need to evacuate." The evacuation of Castera Station made galactic news. 20,000 residents fleeing a brand new facility. The Zephyrim Collective called it a technical malfunction. They didn't mention the human modifications because they didn't want to admit they needed human help. But Castera Station was just the beginning. 3 Valashi Council fleet ships disappeared during a routine patrol jump. They reappeared 6 hours later, damaged and drifting. The crews reported that their navigation systems had malfunctioned catastrophically during the jump. Only emergency manual controls had saved them. Commander Shelthar led the investigation. What she found made her blood run cold. "The navigation algorithms have critical errors," her lead technician reported. "They've always had these errors, but there was additional code running alongside our systems. Code that corrected the mistakes in real time." "Human code?" Shelthar asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, Commander. The humans wrote correction algorithms that fixed our navigation calculations without us knowing. They were so integrated into our systems that we thought they were part of the original Valashi programming." Shelthar ran the numbers herself. Without the human corrections, Valashi jump technology had a 12% catastrophic failure rate. 12%. For decades, they had been trusting their lives to technology that only worked because humans had secretly fixed it. "How many ships are affected?" she asked. "All of them," the technician whispered. "Every ship in the fleet." On the Corthian mining world of Drezizkal, the automated excavation systems stopped working. Then the refinery processors shut down. Then the atmospheric processors began to fail. Chief Engineer Vorntal had worked on Drezkal for 30 years. He knew every system, every machine. Or he thought he did. "The humans were maintaining this equipment," his assistant explained, showing him the maintenance logs. "But they weren't just maintaining it. They were compensating for design flaws." Vorntal studied the reports with growing horror. The Corthian mining equipment was ancient, built using designs that were thousands of years old. The Corthians were proud of their traditional engineering. But those traditional designs had weaknesses that nobody wanted to admit. Human technicians had quietly fixed those weaknesses. They had added safety systems. They had modified power distribution. They had upgraded control algorithms. All without making a fuss about it. All without demanding recognition. "We told them we wanted the equipment maintained exactly as designed," Vorntal said slowly. "They said yes. And then they fixed everything anyway. They saved lives," his assistant said. "Our traditional designs would have killed workers. But the humans knew we wouldn't accept open criticism of Corthian engineering. So they just fixed things silently. Across the galaxy, similar discoveries were happening. Medical facilities found that their equipment needed constant recalibration now that human technicians were gone. Communication networks were experiencing strange glitches. Defense platforms required manual oversight. Transportation systems were breaking down. Every species was finding the same pattern. Humans had been everywhere, touching everything. And nobody had realized how much they depended on human expertise. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. This time, the chamber was not filled with laughter. The mood was tense and angry. "This is sabotage," Zephyron declared. "The humans deliberately made us dependent on them. And now, they've abandoned us." "They didn't make us dependent," Elder Korth said grimly. "We were always dependent. We just didn't know it." Our systems were failing, and the humans were fixing them. We never asked them to stop because we never knew they had started. High Chancellor Vectar listened to the reports with growing unease. His telepathic abilities let him sense the fear in the chamber. Fear and shame. The council was beginning to understand what they had done. How long will it take to replace the human systems? He asked. The council's chief technical advisor, a brilliant Valashi scientist named Krentok, spoke hesitantly. High Chancellor, it's not about replacing systems. It's about understanding what the humans were actually doing. We gave them simple tasks, and they did those tasks. But they also saw problems we couldn't see, and fixed them without bothering us with details. Then we find the problems and fix them ourselves, Vectar said impatiently. We're trying, Krentok said. But High Chancellor, the humans were working across the entire galaxy for 50 years. They were on thousands of stations, hundreds of worlds. Every human who left took their knowledge with them. It will take us years to even catalog all the systems they touched, let alone understand what they did. Years? Vectar's voice was sharp. At minimum, Krentok confirmed. And people will die while we figure it out. The chamber erupted in argument. Species blamed each other for becoming dependent on humans. They argued about who had allowed this to happen. The seemed to five. Some claimed the humans had deliberately created these dependencies as a trap, but a few council members were silent, thinking about the human workers they had seen over the years. The quiet engineers who always seemed to be fixing something, the doctors who studied alien biology with intense focus, the technicians who asked careful questions and took detailed notes. None of them had seemed like they were setting a trap. They had just seemed like they were doing their jobs. Commander Shelthar spoke up from the Valashi section. High Chancellor, I request permission to contact Earth and request technical assistance. The chamber went quiet. Vectar stared at her. Request assistance? He said slowly. From humans? Our fleet cannot operate safely without their navigation corrections, Shelthar said bluntly. I have 3 ships that barely survived their last jump. I will not send more crews to their deaths. Because of pride. We don't need human help, Vectar said firmly. We are Valashi. We are the most advanced telepathic species in the galaxy. We will solve this ourselves. But even as he said it, Vectar knew it was a lie. His own telepathic abilities couldn't fix a broken navigation system. His ancient heritage meant nothing to a malfunctioning life support processor. On Earth, in a secure government facility, Ambassador Min Jun Park watched the galactic news feeds with his superiors. Reports were coming in from everywhere. Stations failing. Ships breaking down. Systems collapsing. We're receiving communication requests, the Secretary General said. Individual colonies, private corporations, even some military units. They're begging for help. They're offering substantial payment. What should we tell them? Asked the Minister of Galactic Affairs. Min Jun didn't smile, but his eyes were cold. Tell them all. Requests must go through official Galactic Council channels. Remind them that we have withdrawn from the Council and are no longer bound by any agreements. They can't request help through the Council, the Secretary General said. That would mean admitting they need us. Admitting they were wrong. Yes, Min Jun said quietly. That's exactly the point. The Secretary General studied the reports more carefully. How long did we plan this? We didn't plan it, Min Jun replied. We just did our jobs. We fixed things that were broken. We improved systems that were inefficient. We saved lives that would have been lost. We documented everything because that's what good engineers do. He pulled up a massive database on the screen. It showed every system humanity had touched, every modification made, every critical dependency created. 50 years of careful work. We didn't create these dependencies to trap them, Min Jun continued. We created them because their technology was killing people, and we couldn't stand by and watch. We fixed things because that's who we are. But we knew taking it all away would hurt them, the minister said. Yes, Minjun agreed. We knew. And we decided they needed to learn this lesson. They needed to understand what we actually do. What we're actually worth. On the screen, another emergency report scrolled past. A Valashi colony ship in distress. A Korthian medical facility running out of supplies. A Zephyrim trade route collapsing. The galaxy was starting to break, and humanity was going to let it break just enough for everyone to understand what they had lost. 2 weeks after humanity's withdrawal, the Valashi colony ship Eternal Dawn suffered complete environmental system failure. The ship carried 40,000 civilians, including 15,000 children. They were traveling to establish a new colony on the far edge of Valashi space, a journey that would take 3 months. They were only 2 weeks into the journey when the ship's environmental systems crashed. Captain Thelvara sent out an emergency distress call. Rescue ships arrived within hours, but what they found horrified them. The Eternal Dawn was dying. Temperature controls were failing, swinging between freezing cold and dangerous heat. Air circulation was breaking down, creating pockets of unbreathable atmosphere. Water recycling systems had stopped working. The ship's powerful engines still functioned perfectly, but the systems that kept the passengers alive were falling apart, piece by piece. How is this possible? Thelvara demanded of her chief engineer. This ship was certified safe just 3 months ago. The engineer, a young Valashi named Kelmos, showed her the diagnostic reports with shaking hands. Captain, the environmental systems were operating on modified code. The original Valashi programming had critical flaws in power distribution. The modifications compensated for those flaws. Human modifications, Thelvara said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Captain. The human technicians who performed our pre-flight inspection didn't just check the systems. They updated the code to keep us safe. Without those updates, the environmental systems can't maintain stable operation for more than a few weeks. Thelvara looked at the scared faces of the passengers crowding around the emergency shelters. 40,000 people who trusted her to keep them safe. 15,000 children who didn't understand why the air was getting hard to breathe. Can we fix it? She asked quietly. Kelmos met her eyes. Not fast enough, Captain. We can keep doing emergency repairs. But without understanding what the humans did, we're just delaying the inevitable. We need to return to the nearest station. The evacuation of the Eternal Dawn became the most watched news event in the galaxy. Rescue ships worked around the clock to transfer passengers before the colony ship's systems failed completely. They saved everyone, but just barely. And everyone in the galaxy watched it happen. The Korthian Medical Institute had been a symbol of pride for 3,000 years. It held the most advanced medical knowledge in the Korthian Empire. The best doctors trained there. Lof, quarter. The most important research happened there. Now, Chief Medical Officer Tarjan stood in her laboratory and faced a truth that terrified her. 60% of our medications no longer work correctly, her lead researcher explained. The formulas are the same, but the results are different. Patients are showing withdrawal symptoms. Some are getting worse instead of better. Targan studied the molecular analysis. What changed? Nothing changed with our medications, the researcher said carefully. But something changed with our patients. Over the past 50 years, human doctors introduced supplemental compounds into our standard treatments. They said they were optimizing the delivery mechanisms. And we believed them, Targan said slowly. They were right, though. The supplements made our medications more effective, but they also made our patients' biology dependent on those supplements. Compounds that mimic minerals found only on Earth. The human doctors were synthesizing them and adding them to our treatments without making a big issue of it. Targan felt sick. So our patients are addicted to human supplements? Not addicted, the researcher corrected. Adapted. Their bodies adapted over 50 years to medications that included Earth-based compounds. Now that those compounds are gone, the medications don't work the same way. How long before we can synthesize these compounds ourselves? The researcher was silent for a long moment. We're trying, Chief Medical Officer. But we don't fully understand Earth's biology yet. The human doctors spent decades studying Corthian biology to create these supplements. It could take us years to do the same in reverse. People will die, Targan whispered. Yes, the researcher agreed. People will die. The Zephyrim Collective faced an economic nightmare. Their vast trading network depended on quantum communication arrays that allowed instant communication across vast distances. Now, those arrays were failing. Fleet Master Cordon personally inspected the communication hub on Zephyrim Prime. What he found made him want to scream. Every single quantum array showed the same problem. The Zephyrim manufactured components were burning out after just a few days of operation. Engineers were replacing them constantly, but they couldn't keep up with the failures. This makes no sense, Cordon said. These arrays worked perfectly for years. They worked perfectly because human technicians were maintaining them, his chief engineer explained. But they weren't just maintaining them. They were preventing them from burning out in the first place. The engineer showed him the maintenance logs. Human technicians had visited each array weekly, sometimes daily. The logs said they were performing routine maintenance. But now that engineers examined what that maintenance actually involved, they discovered the truth. The Zephyrim quantum arrays were built with substandard components to save money. The Zephyrim Collective was wealthy, but they were wealthy because they cut costs wherever possible. The quantum arrays looked impressive, but they were built to fail. Human technicians had known this. They had been replacing the worst components, recalibrating the systems, and nursing the arrays along for years, all while letting the Zephyrim believe their equipment was superior. They made us look good while we treated them like servants, Cordon said bitterly. Yes, Fleetmaster, the engineer said quietly. Around the galaxy, independent investigators were uncovering the full scope of humanity's work. Species that had hired human workers were now hiring other species to figure out what those humans had actually been doing. The reports were disturbing. Humanity had created a comprehensive simulation of the entire galactic infrastructure. They knew exactly where every critical dependency existed, because they had created most of them. They had documented everything with careful precision. For 50 years, humans had embedded themselves into every major system in galactic civilization, not as conquerors or saboteurs. As fixers and maintainers, and quiet improvers, they had made themselves essential while pretending to be irrelevant. The Galactic Council's emergency sessions grew more desperate. High Chancellor Vectar watched his carefully maintained authority crumble as species panicked. We must negotiate with Earth, Council Member Shirta of the Ilari Federation declared. People are dying. Our pride is not worth their lives. If we negotiate, we give Earth exactly what they want, Vectar argued. We admit they were right. We admit we need them. We do need them, Shirta shouted. That's the truth, High Chancellor. We need them. And they know it. And everyone in the galaxy knows it. The only ones still denying it are in this chamber. Other council members murmured agreement. The mood was turning against Vectar. Individual colonies are already trying to contact Earth, Elder Korth reported. They're offering substantial payments, favorable trade agreements, even territory. Earth refuses all of them. They say all requests must go through official council channels. But we can't make an official request without acknowledging them as equals, Zephron said in frustration. That's the trap. They won't help unless we give them what they want. It's not a trap, Commander Shelthar said quietly. It's a lesson. We treated them as inferior. We mocked their contributions. Now they're showing us the truth. We were wrong, Vectar glared at her. Commander, you forget yourself. No, High Chancellor. I think I'm remembering myself. I'm remembering that 3 of my crew members died because I was too proud to admit we needed help. I won't let more die for pride. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew about the Velashi ships that had died during bad jumps. Everyone knew about the Eternal Dawn. Everyone knew about the medical crisis facing the Corthians. People were dying. And the council was arguing about pride. Ambassador Minjun Park received a private communication from Commander Shelthar. She spoke directly to him, bypassing all official channels. "Ambassador Park," she said, her telepathic presence subdued and respectful. "I am contacting you personally to request help for my fleet. I cannot speak for the Council, but I can speak for myself. You were right. We were wrong. We need your help, and we should have recognized your worth from the beginning." Minjun listened carefully. He had learned to read Valashi body language over the years. Shelthar was sincere. She was also terrified for her crews. "Commander Shelthar," he replied, "I appreciate your honesty, but I cannot help individual requesters. If Earth helps some species and not others, we become kingmakers. We become the problem. All of you must understand together what we are and what we did. Then my people will die," Shelthar said simply. "Some of them might," Minjun agreed, and his voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry for that. But this lesson has to hurt, Commander. It has to hurt enough that no one ever forgets it." Shelthar was quiet for a moment. "You're not punishing us, are you? You're trying to save us from yourselves," Minjun said. "From the arrogance that almost destroyed your fleet. From the pride that prevents you from seeing the value in people who are different from you. It's a harsh lesson, Ambassador. The best ones usually are. The galaxy was breaking, systems were failing, people were dying, but Minjun Park watched it all with sad, determined eyes, because the galaxy needed to understand one fundamental truth. Humanity wasn't primitive. Humanity wasn't inferior. And humanity wouldn't be invisible anymore. 4 weeks after humanity's withdrawal, the Valashi core world of Shaltora faced its darkest day. The planetary shield failed during a solar storm. Shaltora was home to 3 billion Valashi. The planet orbited close to its sun, receiving beautiful light but dangerous radiation. The planetary shield had protected the population for 500 years. It was considered one of the most reliable pieces of Valashi technology ever created. Then it failed. Warning sirens screamed across the planet. People had less than an hour to reach underground shelters before the radiation hit. The evacuation was chaotic. Families were separated. Children were lost in the crowds. The elderly and sick couldn't move fast enough. When the radiation storm passed, the death toll was catastrophic. 117,000 dead. Millions more with radiation sickness. The Valashi Empire went into mourning. The investigation revealed what many had already suspected. The planetary shield's energy distribution system had critical flaws. Human engineers had been compensating for those flaws for 30 years, making constant micro-adjustments that kept the shield stable. Without those adjustments, the shield couldn't handle the stress of a major solar storm. High Chancellor Vektar stood in the ruins of a hospital, looking at the bodies covered in white sheets. These were his people, his responsibility. And they had died because of his pride. A young Valashi girl approached him. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her face was pale with radiation exposure. "Hi, Chancellor," she said in a small voice. "My mother says you wouldn't ask the humans for help. Is that true?" Vektar looked down at her. He opened his mouth to explain, to justify, to defend his decisions. But no words came out. What could he say? That his pride was worth her mother's life? That Valashi superiority mattered more than Valashi children? "Yes," he finally whispered. "That's true." The girl looked at him with ancient eyes. Vektar had no answer. The Korthian military faced a crisis that threatened their security. Their warships, the pride of their ancient empire, couldn't sustain more than 3 consecutive jumps without critical system failures. Admiral Korvesh commanded an invasion fleet of 200 ships. They had been deployed to suppress a pirate threat in the outer sectors. But after 3 jumps, the fleet was stranded between systems, their jump drives overheating and failing. "This is impossible," Korvesh said, studying the engineering reports. "Our jump drives are based on designs that are 7,000 years old. They're proven technology." Quote, Quote, "Their ancient technology," his chief engineer corrected carefully. "The designs are old, Admiral. They were never updated or improved because we believed they were perfect. But they weren't perfect. Human technicians had been calibrating them before each jump, making adjustments that kept them operating safely." "Why didn't we know about this?" Corvesh demanded. "Because we never asked, Admiral. The humans did their jobs quietly. They didn't bother us with technical details. They just made sure our ships worked." Corvesh looked out at his fleet, dead in space. 200 ships. 15,000 crew members. Stranded because the Corthians were too proud to admit their ancient designs needed improvement. "How long until we can jump again?" he asked. "Days, Admiral. Maybe weeks. We need to manually recalibrate every ship. And even then, we can't make more than a few jumps before the drives overheat again. So our entire military is crippled." "Yes, Admiral." The pirate groups in the outer sectors heard about the Corthian fleet's problems. They began attacking Corthian outposts with new confidence. The mighty Corthian military couldn't respond. They were stuck, helpless, waiting for their ships to cool down. The Zephyrim economy was in freefall. Trade routes collapsed as communication arrays failed. Ships couldn't coordinate. Stations couldn't process orders. Manufacturing ground to a halt. On Zephyrim Prime, riots broke out as food shipments stopped arriving. The collective's wealth meant nothing if goods couldn't be transported. Store shelves emptied. Hospitals ran out of medical supplies. People panicked. Fleetmaster Cordon watched his beautiful trading empire crumble. The Zephyrim had spent centuries building this network, becoming wealthy by connecting the galaxy. Now it was falling apart in weeks. "How could we let this happen?" he asked his advisors. "How could we become so dependent on one species without knowing it?" "Because they never demanded recognition," one advisor said quietly. "They just did the work. We assumed it was easy work, unimportant work. We didn't realize they were holding everything together." Smaller council species began breaking ranks. The Ilari Federation made a public announcement that shocked the galaxy. "We acknowledge our dependence on human expertise," President Shelkara of the Ilari said in a broadcast. "We acknowledge that we undervalued their contributions. We acknowledge that we were wrong. The Ilari Federation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council to negotiate independently with Earth." The announcement caused chaos. Other species watched to see what would happen. Earth's response came quickly. Ambassador Min Jun Park himself delivered the message. "The Ilari Federation has shown wisdom and courage in acknowledging the truth," Min Jun said. "Earth will provide humanitarian assistance to Ilari worlds. But we will not return to the old arrangement. The Ilari will acknowledge what we built, what we are, and treat us as equals." "We agree to all terms," President Shelkara replied immediately. Within 2 days, human teams arrived on Ilari worlds, but they were different now. They wore Earth uniforms with pride. They documented everything openly. They charged fair rates for their work. They demanded recognition for every system they touched. Most importantly, they taught Ilari engineers everything they did. No more silent fixes. No more invisible improvements. Everything was transparent and acknowledged. The change rippled across the galaxy. Other species saw the Ilari getting help while they suffered. They saw Ilari systems coming back online. They saw Ilari medical facilities saving lives again. And they started to wonder if pride was really worth dying for. High Chancellor Vektar faced a vote of no confidence from the Council. Half the member species were calling for his resignation. His own Valashi government was turning against him. In a desperate move, Vektar authorized a covert operation. Valashi intelligence agents would raid Earth's abandoned embassy facilities and hack into human databases. They would steal the technical information Earth was withholding. They would take what humans wouldn't give. The operation was planned carefully. The best Valashi hackers and telepaths worked together. They infiltrated an Earth embassy on a neutral station. They accessed the main computer systems. They began downloading files. Then everything went wrong. The moment they tried to open the encrypted files, their systems fried. Quantum encryption keys triggered defensive programs that destroyed the Valashi computers. The telepaths who tried to bypass the digital security by reading the minds of human guards found their minds flooded with painful static. Alarms went off across the station. Earth security forces arrived within minutes. The Valashi agents were caught, their equipment destroyed, their operation exposed. Earth made the incident public. Ambassador Min-Jun Park broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. High Chancellor Vector authorized an attempt to steal human technology by force, Min-Jun said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. This is not diplomacy. This is not cooperation. This is theft. And it shows that some members of the Council still don't understand. The broadcast continued, showing documentation of everything humanity had done for 50 years. Every system improved. Every life saved. Every disaster prevented. Min-Jun showed the galaxy what humans had built for them, all while being treated as primitive servants. You called us inferior, Min-Jun said. You laughed at our achievements. You dismissed our contributions as simple labor. But which civilization collapsed the moment we stopped helping? Which species are dying because they can't maintain their own technology? Which empire is stranded in space because their ancient designs weren't as perfect as they believed? The broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy. Citizens learned for the first time how dependent they had been on humans. They learned how their leaders had mocked the very people keeping them alive. Public opinion turned like a tide. On Valashi worlds, citizens demanded Vector's resignation. On Korthian worlds, people protested against the Council's arrogance. On Zephyrim worlds, riots grew worse as people blamed their leaders for the economic collapse. The old Galactic Council was crumbling. Species that had stood together for centuries turned on each other, blaming everyone except themselves for becoming dependent on humans. Ambassador Park watched it all from Earth. The Secretary General sat beside him. Is this what you wanted? She asked quietly. No, Min-Jun said truthfully. I wanted them to respect us. I wanted them to see us as equals. I wanted them to acknowledge what we built for them. But I didn't want people to die. I wanted them to see us. People are dying, though. Yes, Min-Jun said. His voice was heavy. They are. But if we had just accepted their contempt and kept working silently, more people would have died eventually. Better infrastructure built on respect than systems held together by invisible labor. Do you think they've learned? Min-Jun looked at the screens, showing protests, riots, and desperate pleas for help from across the galaxy. He saw the Valashi mourning their dead. He saw the Korthians facing their military weakness. He saw the Zephyrim Empire crumbling. They're starting to, he said. The question is whether they'll remember the lesson. High Chancellor Vector stood in the council chamber one last time. His resignation was already prepared. His political career was over. His legacy would be the death of Valashi superiority. I was wrong, he said simply. The chamber was packed, every species watching. I believed we were superior. I believed humans were primitive. I believed our ancient knowledge made us wise. But wisdom isn't about age. It's about seeing truth clearly. And I was blind. He looked directly at the cameras, knowing humans on Earth were watching. Ambassador Park. Humanity. You were right. We need you. We always needed you. And we should have said so from the beginning. I'm sorry. The apology didn't fix anything. It didn't bring back the dead. It didn't repair the broken systems. But it was a start. On Earth, Min-Jun Park allowed himself a small, sad smile. The lesson was almost learned. 8 weeks after humanity's withdrawal, the old Galactic Council officially dissolved. High Chancellor Vector's resignation was just the beginning. Elder Korth of the Korthians stepped down, taking responsibility for his people's suffering. Zephyron of the Zephyrim Collective was forced out by angry merchants who had lost everything. One by one, the leaders who had mocked humanity fell from power. In their place came new voices. Commander Shelthar represented the Valashi. Admiral Korvesh spoke for the Korthians. President Shelkara of the Ilari Federation stepped forward as a voice of reason. They gathered not on Concordia Prime, but on a neutral station, calling for a new beginning. They called it the Galactic Assembly, and they invited Earth to be a founding member. Ambassador Minjun Park arrived at the assembly with a full delegation of human diplomats, engineers, doctors, and scientists. This time, when he walked into the chamber, nobody laughed. The representative stood as he entered, showing respect. Ambassador Park, Commander Shelthar said formally, "On behalf of the Valashi people, I apologize for the contempt we showed humanity. We were wrong. We would be honored if Earth would join us in building something better." President Shelkara spoke next. "The Ilari have seen what true partnership with humanity looks like. It is built on respect, transparency, and acknowledgement. We propose that these principles become the foundation of the new assembly." Admiral Korvesh added his voice. "The Korthians have learned that ancient knowledge without humility is worthless. We have 7,000 years of history, but we forgot how to learn. Humanity remembered. We ask that you teach us again." Min Jun looked at the gathered representatives. He saw genuine remorse in their faces. He also saw fear, uncertainty, and desperate hope. The galaxy had been broken. Now they wanted help putting it back together. "Earth accepts membership in the Galactic Assembly," Min Jun said. "But we have conditions." End of line. The chamber tensed. Min Jun continued. "First, no species is minor. No species is superior. We are all equal members, regardless of age or technological level. Second, all contributions are credited and acknowledged. No more invisible labor. Third, infrastructure becomes transparent. Every species must understand the systems they depend on. Fourth, knowledge is shared freely. No more pride, preventing progress." He paused, making sure they understood. "And fifth, if this fails, if we return to the old ways of contempt and arrogance, Earth will withdraw again. And next time, we won't come back." The representatives voted unanimously to accept Earth's conditions. The Galactic Assembly was born, but Min Jun knew that votes were easy. The real work came next. Human teams returned to the galaxy. But everything was different now. They wore Earth uniforms clearly marked with human symbols. They introduced themselves by name and specialty. They documented every system they touched in public records. Most importantly, they insisted on working alongside alien engineers, teaching as they fixed. On a Valashi station, human engineer Sarah Chen worked with a Valashi technician named Levitas to repair a failing life support system. "The problem is here," Sarah explained, pointing at the power distribution node. "Your original design assumes constant power flow. But in reality, power fluctuates. These fluctuations create cascade failures over time." Levitas studied the system carefully. "How did you compensate for this?" "We added buffer circuits that absorb the fluctuations." Sarah showed him the human modifications. "It's not complicated technology. It's just understanding that perfect conditions don't exist in the real world. We designed for perfect conditions because we believed our technology was perfect," Levitas said quietly. "Nothing is perfect," Sarah said gently. "That's why engineering is ongoing. You don't build something once and forget it. You maintain it, improve it, adapt it. That's not a weakness. That's how things stay alive." Levitas worked alongside Sarah for 3 days, learning not just the technical fixes but the philosophy behind them. When the life support system was running smoothly, he could maintain it himself. More importantly, he understood why it worked. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human doctors taught Korthian physicians about the supplements that had become essential to their treatments. But they also taught them how to synthesize those supplements independently. The goal wasn't to make the Korthians dependent on Earth forever. The goal was to make them capable. On Korthian mining worlds, human technicians worked with Korthian engineers to redesign equipment. They kept what was good about the traditional designs and improved what was dangerous. The new equipment bore both Corthian and human design elements, acknowledged equally. The Zephyrim Collective learned the hardest lessons. Their entire economy had been built on cutting corners and looking impressive while hiding flaws. Human engineers were brutally honest about the Zephyrim infrastructure. "This quantum array is garbage," human technician James Park told Fleet Master Cordon directly. "It looks amazing, but it's built with cheap components that fail constantly. You need to rebuild it properly, or accept that it will keep breaking down." Cordon bristled at the insult to Zephyrim engineering. Then he remembered the riots, the collapsed economy, the suffering his people endured. He swallowed his pride. "Show us how to build it properly," he said. The reconstruction took months. It cost the Zephyrim Collective enormous amounts of money. But when it was done, they had communication arrays that actually worked reliably. More importantly, they had engineers who understood how to maintain them. The Galactic Assembly's first major initiative was the Infrastructure Transparency Project. Every major system in the galaxy was audited. Human engineers worked with local species to document how everything worked, what the failure points were, and what maintenance was required. The project revealed uncomfortable truths. Most species' technology had serious flaws they had never acknowledged. The Valashi navigation systems, the Corthian life support designs, the Zephyrim communication networks, all had problems that had been hidden or ignored for decades. But the project also created something new, a shared understanding. When a Valashi engineer and a human engineer and a Corthian engineer all understood the same system, they could maintain it together. No single species was essential. Knowledge became truly galactic. Ambassador Park walked through the new assembly chambers 6 months after they opened. The building was different from the old council chambers. Instead of seats arranged in ranks showing superiority, the assembly chamber was circular, with every species delegation at the same level. A young Valashi approached him. She was the same girl who had questioned High Chancellor Vektar at the hospital. Her radiation sickness had been treated by human doctors working with Valashi physicians. "Ambassador Park," she said shyly, "I wanted to thank you. The human doctor who treated me, Dr. Williams, she taught our doctors how to help people like me. She didn't have to do that." Minjun knelt down to her level. "Yes, she did have to. That's what doctors do. What all of us should do. We help each other." "High Chancellor Vektar said you taught us a lesson," the girl said. "What lesson?" Minjun thought carefully about his answer. "We taught you that everyone has value. That being different doesn't mean being inferior. That pride can be dangerous. That working together is stronger than working alone." The girl considered this. "Those are good lessons. I'm glad you taught us. Even though people died." "I'm not glad people died," Minjun said softly. "I wish we could have taught you differently. But sometimes, people only learn when the consequences are real." The girl hugged him suddenly. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Minjun felt tears in his eyes. "We never gave up. We just needed you to see us clearly." The Assembly's second major initiative was the Cultural Exchange Program. Species that had barely acknowledged each other now worked together on joint projects. Valashi telepaths learned to appreciate human emotional complexity. Corthians studied human adaptability. Zephyrim merchants discovered human innovation. Humanity learned too. They studied Valashi telepathic arts, improving human psychological understanding. They incorporated Corthian traditional engineering principles with human innovation. They adopted Zephyrim business practices that actually worked. The galaxy was becoming truly integrated, not through dominance but through genuine cooperation. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal, Ambassador Park gave a speech at the Assembly Anniversary celebration. Representatives from every member species attended. The chamber was full of hope instead of contempt. "A year ago, we walked away from the old council," Minjun said. "It was the hardest decision humanity ever made. We knew people would suffer. We knew systems would fail. We knew there would be consequences. He paused, looking at the faces around him. Valashi, Korthians, Zephyrim, Ilari, humans, and dozens of other species, all listening. But we also knew that continuing as we were would eventually destroy us all. Not quickly, with dramatic failure. Slowly, with quiet resentment and hidden dependencies, and growing contempt. We couldn't let that future happen, so we forced change. We forced recognition. We forced you to see what we actually were, and what we actually did. Not because we wanted power, not because we wanted revenge, but because we wanted genuine partnership. Commander Shelthar stood to respond. Ambassador Park, the Valashi people owe humanity a debt we can never fully repay. You saved us from our own arrogance. 117,000 of our people died on Shaltora because we were too proud to ask for help. That tragedy will never be forgotten, but neither will the lesson. Admiral Korvesh added. The Korthians spent 7,000 years believing our ancient ways were perfect. Humanity showed us that wisdom isn't about age. It's about being willing to learn, to change, to admit mistakes. President Shelkara spoke last. The Ilari were the first to break ranks, and we're proud of that choice. We've seen what true partnership looks like. It's built on honesty, respect, and mutual acknowledgement. Every species in this assembly benefits from this new approach. Minjun looked at the gathering and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. We didn't punish you, he said gently. We showed you the truth. The galaxy isn't stronger when one species stands above others. It's stronger when all species stand together, each contributing their unique strengths. Humanity's strength was never violence or primitive survival instincts. Our strength was humility. We questioned everything, including ourselves. We learned from everyone, including those who scorned us. We built for others, not just ourselves. And when you finally saw that, everything changed. The assembly chamber erupted in applause. Not polite, formal applause. Real appreciation. Minjun Park looked at his fellow ambassadors, the engineers working together on joint projects, the doctors sharing knowledge freely, the teachers building cross-species educational programs. He thought about Sarah Chen teaching Levitas, about buffer circuits. He thought about Dr. Williams training Valashi physicians. He thought about all the humans who had worked quietly for 50 years, never demanding recognition, but always deserving it. The Secretary General approached him after the ceremony. Did we do the right thing? She asked. Minjun thought about the 117,000 Valashi who died on Shaltora. He thought about the crews lost in bad jumps. He thought about the suffering that happened because humanity withdrew. Then he thought about the girl who hugged him, about engineers teaching each other, about a galaxy learning to work together. Yes, he said finally. It was painful. It was hard. People suffered. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was a galaxy built on contempt and invisible labor and quiet resentment. That would have eventually collapsed anyway, probably with more casualties. We forced the collapse early, when we could control it and rebuild something better. No regrets? Many regrets, Minjun admitted. But no doubt, we did what had to be done. The galaxy had scorned humanity at the Council. They had called humans primitive, inferior, useful only for simple labor. They had laughed at Earth's achievements and dismissed humanity's contributions. But humanity hadn't responded with violence or revenge. They had responded with truth. They had shown the galaxy exactly what they were, what they had built, and what their absence meant. And in that truth, a new civilization was born. One built on respect instead of contempt, on acknowledgement instead of dismissal, on genuine partnership instead of hidden dependencies. Humanity had taught the galaxy its greatest lesson. True civilization isn't measured by how advanced your technology is, or how long your history spans. It's measured by how you treat those who are different from you, by whether you see value in all people or only in those who look, think, or act like you. The galaxy had failed that test. But they had learned. And together, they were building something better. Ambassador Min Jun Park walked out of the assembly chambers into the station's observation deck. Through the massive windows, he could see Earth in the distance. Blue and beautiful. "We're coming home," he whispered to his homeworld. Not as servants, not as invisible helpers, but as partners, as equals, as the species that taught the galaxy how to truly see. And Earth, ancient and patient, continued its eternal rotation, proud of the children who had ventured into the stars and changed everything.